Good morning. Thank you for joining us for our first in a series of building the blueprint for CLSD success. My name is Roland O'Daniel. I'm the CEO of the Collaborative for Teaching and Learning, and I'll be your host for today's session. We want to start this session by saying kudos to KDE for their work in bringing the resources to districts to support reading in the state of Kentucky, specifically through the CLSD grants. This is the third in a row that KDE has applied for that they have been awarded. This one is targeting HQIR, or high quality instructional resources, really looking at reading birth through grade 12 and how do we really support students in learning how to read effectively using high quality instructional resources and high quality professional learning. We really also want to make sure that we point out that a big part of the Read to Succeed and the comprehensive literacy work in the state of Kentucky also is targeting increased family engagement. We will be doing a series of three webinars and one outreach. And the first one is today's session around building the blueprint. What has it looked like historically in the state of Kentucky? The second one is scheduled for November 21st. Our Jenny Aberly will be joined by Eric Hirsch and Dr. Tom Gusky, thinking about this idea of high quality instructional resources, which ones make sense, and how do you design high quality professional learning to support that. And then the third one, which the date will be coming soon, will tell a little bit more about the stories of high quality implementation of the resources. So let's get started with today's webinar. I'm lucky to be joined by two extraordinary panelists in the state of Kentucky who have a deep, rich history of understanding of literacy in the state, as well as family engagement and educational status in the state. I'm joined by Dr. Felicia Cummings-Smith, the CEO and President of National Centers for Family Learning, and Bridget Blom-Ramsey, the President and CEO of the Pritchard Committee. Thank you to both of you for joining us today. Is there anything you would like to say as we get started?
Felicia?
No, I don't think so, Roland. Just glad to be here and excited that CTL has pulled these webinars and opportunities together. And kudos again to the Kentucky Department of Education.
Yeah, likewise. And good morning, everyone. I just will add thank you for taking your time on a Monday morning this fall to engage in this conversation. It's really a show of your commitment to improving literacy in the state.
Thanks for that, Bridget, because I also want to say, remember, if you want to submit a question, Emily Wilson and Stacy Edelman are off camera dealing with any questions that come in, and they'll be relaying them to us as they are pertinent to the conversation. So let's dive into the first topic. We're really going to look at major components in this the major components of this webinar, really this idea of raising awareness of the CLSD grant for those districts that aren't familiar or haven't participated in the past, what's available. Really thinking about this idea of how do we set districts up for success with this work, thinking about where we've been in the past, what are the opportunities that are going to arise as a result of this work that KDE has done, and the great work that families can do to support literacy in the state of Kentucky. Again, the goal really is to position leaders to be successful with the application of this grant if they choose, if it fits your vision and goals. So we'll look at the historical literacy efforts in Kentucky, have a conversation around the Read to Succeed work and the implementation that we've had in the state in the last 2 years, and then really thinking about how we work as a community to engage families and schools together to support reading for all of our students. There'll be a Q&A time at the end, and then we'll also make these reading recordings available to you. So finally, let's get started with this historical literacy efforts. We're going to set a little context for what has happened historically in the state of Kentucky. And we're not going to delve a long way back and think about it, but as Dr. Smith said earlier, we can go back to the early 2000s when $60 million came in for the initial reading grant from the feds. I came to CTL actually in 2006 as a response to the Striving Readers grant that Kentucky received. And this again is the third CLSD, or really it's the third comprehensive literacy state development grant that Kentucky has been awarded. Previously, it was called Striving Readers, but they've made that shift to comprehensive because Striving Readers really was associated with adolescent readers. And now we want to think about that comprehensive literacy. How do we work with babies when they're born all the way through the time when students graduate from high school in the state? So Felicia, I'll throw this to you first, and then we'll give Bridget a chance to respond. And that is, what do you want to add to the historical understanding of literacy in the state, where we've been and where we're going?
I don't know that there's much more to add, Roland, that would elaborate more on what you've just described, other than we do have such a rich history of investing in this state in early reading, particularly, and in some degree, middle school and high school. And I think that there's a large evidence base of why we now need to be thinking even more deliberately preschool through 12th grade. And I would also argue to some degree when Council on Post-Secondary Education and Kentucky Adult Education also emphasizes literacy for adult learners who have been struggling. But this comprehensive approach that is found in this grant and has been pretty consistent in previous grants is absolutely essential for district leaders to think about. While I know many district leaders say, yes, but we're responsible for early learning through 12th grade, that body of work and aligning that body of work is essential, even though some of that may not be the sole responsibility of our public school systems. And that means engaging with the community in new and different ways to create that coherence and alignment. So I think the big push that I'm hopeful for, even greater push that I'm hopeful for in this new opportunity is deeper engagement with birth to 5, as well as alignment of resources and strategies K through 12.
Bridget, anything you would like to add to that?
For those listening in this morning, I think I want to remind everyone, as Felicia has shared the history, that a focus on literacy is nothing new for Kentucky. We are building upon really strong work in the past, and an indication of that really strong work is that by a state that was at the bottom of all of the national rankings in education, income, health in the 1980s. Had a literacy ranking for 4th graders of 8th in the nation. So Kentucky's done incredible work climbing from the very bottom, and we need to make sure that folks really understand that. And that climbing to 8th in the nation is a testament to our ability to come together, educators, policymakers, communities, and really focus on an outcome that we want to improve. Another area where Kentucky has done this is the graduation rate. So we rank 3rd in the nation in high school graduation. And while we know, all of you who are listening in know that graduation is not enough for a young person to truly be on a path to success, they need more than high school graduation. The fact that we're 3rd in the nation today is a testament to Kentuckians focusing on a key outcome and making sure we were successful. And so I think this grant offers us an opportunity to renew that commitment to a core outcome we need to improve in our state and realize that success. So I'm excited by the grant that KDE got this time around and know that we're building on past success and look forward to the work that comes out of the grantee's implementation.
I do think it is really important to recognize where Kentucky has come from and recognize that when we do work together, we have the capacity to really make things change and move things along. I think it's also really important to recognize that those changes didn't happen overnight. And what I appreciate about what KDE is doing in this work is they are aligning, as you said, Felicia, all of their efforts to push in the same direction. And so that if whatever we do inside of this grant is supporting existing initiatives already in place. I also think it's really important that we think about that evidence base as it's growing. And Bridget, I know this is something you'll talk about as we go through, but that best practices institute that you all are developing, really thinking about how we help districts and help schools and help families make really well-informed decisions, and what are the best practices that we can put forward. And I think that's a testament again to the work in Kentucky, setting the foundation, having a vision, and staying with that vision. I think that's going to be something that we'll come back over and over to today as we continue forward with the conversation. So the next question is, as we think about this new opportunity for the districts in Kentucky, what are some opportunities that this might allow schools and districts to consider within the parameters of this grant? I'll get started with one of them, and then Bridget I'll toss it to you, and we'll let Felicia respond last. I do
Okay.
think the idea of this version of CLSD really is pushing high quality instructional resources. So the school districts themselves will have the opportunity to put in place kindergarten through grade 12 resources that have been vetted by multiple sources to make sure that they fit with the science of reading or the latest research on reading, making sure that we're hitting all 5 strands of effective reading instruction. That in and of itself, in a time when districts are struggling to have enough resources, is a great way for them to put that in place, support it effectively. And the 5-year nature of this grant is a really important consideration. What we know about change science is it takes 3 to 5 years. I really appreciate the way that KDE was able to hit the ground running. That's no small task to be funded in October and to have an RFA out by the end of October and the beginning of November. That means a short turnaround for schools, but that means they're continuing the work and really pushing the opportunities. So that's one aspect that I think is a really critical component. Bridget, what are some other opportunities for districts?
Yeah, so I'll add the family and community engagement piece. So really deepening the approach to family engagement, and as an extension or a supportive factor in family engagement, deep community engagement in this work. So really good implementation, and likely exceptional best practices are going to come when we see family school community partnerships. And I think building that in on the front end so that our school districts are not taking this on wholly by themselves, but are expecting community partners to be part of the work, and are expecting to resource and engage parents deeply in what they can do at home and how they can be more engaged in the school building, in the classroom, supporting an environment of successful literacy will be really important. So our communities are a reflection of our schools, and our schools are a reflection of our community, and families and students are in the middle of all of that. So really thinking about this not just as a program or a grant, but as an opportunity to create a different climate and culture, again, about school, family, community partnerships that zero in on the outcome we're after, and in this case, it's literacy.
And the thing that I'll add to elaborate on Bridget's point, the research is really clear around family engagement. And while this is included as a part of the work that districts and schools need to consider, we know that when parents and caregivers work closely with schools to address learning needs of a child, we see better outcomes. And so, to Bridget's point, I'm just elaborating on the importance and priority of that family and community engagement. But I'll also mention, we know how important it is when we start early. And, it would be unwise of me not to reiterate the importance of early learning in this process, sitting as the governor's chair for early childhood on the advisory council. So my emphasis would be, let's start early. Let's get some strong practices in place at the P5 level, through 5 years old level, and really begin to deepen our approaches there to align them so that when children get to kindergarten, they are already on the right foot and excelling as early readers. So I think a combination of all of what we've suggested really is the opportunity in front of us as a state to enhance what's been going on.
Yeah, I really appreciate both of your focuses on that idea of that deep engagement and really making sure that we task school districts with a job, but we don't make it that they're doing it on their own, and that the power of including the families and really building a strong stakeholder buy-in for your plans is a really critical piece. And as we move forward in this conversation, I'm a slide behind. That brings us to the Read to Succeed component as well, and that is, again, the continued efforts that KDE and the legislature have put in front of districts that really make sure that what we're doing is setting students up for success long term. We all know the research, maybe we don't all know, but the research behind when students come into kindergarten ready, and the trajectory that puts them on by fourth grade, and then the fourth grade trajectory then goes from there, is a very clear delineation. So making sure that we're setting all of our families up for success can just make it better for the schools in the long term. That's going to be something that is going to have some opportunity for innovation as well as some existing priorities. And so let's talk a little bit about where we are as we move into, or we're now well into the second year of implementation of Read to Succeed. What are some of the efforts that we're seeing? What are some of the successes that we may be seeing as a result of that work? Bridget, would you like to field this one first?
Sure. A big success, I have to kind of step back to the passage of the bill. That was a huge success. The legislature, with the leadership of Representative Tipton and Senator West, passing the Read to Succeed Act. That bill found itself in different forms for, I believe, 4 or 5 sessions before it passed. It started as a retention bill, similar to what we see in Florida, and I believe still see in Ohio, where if a young person was not meeting reading proficiency standards by the end of 3rd grade, they were held back. We at the Pritchard Committee did not feel, and we don't see that the research supports a retention bill being the way to go to improve literacy. So I think policy leaders, advocates really doubled down on the importance of professional learning and investing deeply in professional learning to improve literacy outcomes. So fast forward to the passage of the bill, what became known and is now known as the Read to Succeed Act. It invests deeply, that first bill, $22 million over 2 years in professional learning for teachers around the science of reading, a combination of approaches, and the family engagement piece. So that is really, I think, a testament to policymakers, educators, interested parties coming together and really targeting what we knew would work for the state, putting money behind it and then resourcing KDE to support it. And so KDE, I believe, has just closed the application process on the 3rd cohort of teachers who will come into that professional learning environment. It will go from fall of 2024 to 2026. And then we'll have 3 cohorts of teachers across the state who are implementing based on this new professional learning. And we'll be able to start to draw from a research standpoint, what's working, where is it working, why is it working, and hopefully tell a lot of good stories about trajectory changing results for young people. Roland, I will add, if hopefully folks are already aware, but if not, there is a consumer guide that KDE published on the Read to Succeed Act. It's a really great document that provides a good overview for anyone interested in this topic, and you can find it on KDE's website under, let me find that quickly. the Kentucky Reading Academies, there's a summer conference, and if you keep scrolling down, there are all kinds of links of information, which gives a great background.
Thank you for that. I'll jump in, and then Felicia, I'll let you go after that if that's okay. I really appreciate your focus on that idea of professional learning as a major piece of Read to Succeed. And I think that KDE is doubling down on that with this approach to CLSD. CLSD is a professional learning forward grant application, but they're having a nice combination of of funds available for resources and then funds available for the professional learning to support that. Again, going back to what we know about teacher change, the best way to impact tier 1 teacher instruction is to provide curriculum and the professional learning to implement that curriculum. The professional learning isn't just about what buttons to push and what resources are available, but it really is about how to design instruction that engages students in the act of learning. And I think that's a really critical piece, but it points them back to the resources they have so they don't feel the responsibility to have to go out and create something. They can take the resources they have, implement them strongly, and get the support they need to be effective with that. That's where the vision that we continue to come back and talk about, the vision by the legislature, the vision by KDE, and the continued vision by districts to really think about how we support students in learning to read effectively. And then as they transition from learning to read to more of that, using that reading process to learn content. I know we're moving away from that language of reading to learn, but more of that idea of using the skills we've developed to apply to content learning really is a great vision for districts to have as part of this grant, and making sure that they are supporting that foundational literacy, but also the instructional practices that make that most effective. I think that was a really critical piece of this grant that also ties in very directly with the Read to Succeed efforts. Felicia?
I think the only thing I would add is what I appreciate about the state's efforts on improving literacy is the emphasis on looking at the research base and understanding how to translate that directly to practice for what happens in classrooms on a day-to-day basis. And in order for, as both of you have mentioned, in order for educators and leaders to make the most of that research, the professional learning experiences are necessary. And this is something that has been a longstanding salient point of any work that has happened across the state, in my opinion, even as early as the Reading First grant from 2000, which required a pretty significant amount of professional learning to be able to implement effective practices in the classroom and support at the district and school level. So administrators had support, district level leaders had support as well. And I believe that our legislature really began to look at what are some of those effective practices, and let's keep those in our and as we make decisions about effective policy about improving literacy. And so I'm thrilled that the Kentucky Department of Education, the legislature, have also invested in a reading research center now housed at the University of Louisville, and that work will continue to help us all stay smart and get better together if we use the research, have the professional learning experiences so that educators and leaders understand how to translate that research into practice in very practical ways to make improvements happen for young people across P through 12. So I'm thrilled that the research effort, the professional learning is central to the continuation of the work we still have ahead of us. And this time, we are really looking at young people who have been impacted by our school closures as a part of COVID, and those children are in those early grades now, and we need to really ramp up and use this opportunity to enhance their literacy skills as a part of this next grant. So I'm thrilled that that combination of research, practice, and professional learning are all going to support the frontline individuals, the educators who are teaching reading on a day-to-day basis in our classrooms, P through 12th grade.
I think we've touched on this specific question quite a bit in our last responses, but I'll give you a chance to read through this. And this is, again, this idea of how could this opportunity support districts in fulfilling the goals outlined in Read to Succeed. I'll look back at some of the work with one of the districts that we've been involved in the last couple of years, and that's Russellville Independent. And they are a current CLSD grant, but they really have made that birth through grade 5 focus as part of their work. And so they have been thinking about this idea of how do they reach out to families, very intentionally giving those families literacy supports so that as their students come into kindergarten, they are closer or better prepared to be kindergarten ready. And while early literacy is really around giving students a lot of opportunity to engage with text. They're not ready to be readers on their own, but hearing that fluent voice, being able to engage with text, being able to actively move, thinking about those Ecker standards. So I know that Russellville is one of those districts that has really created a vision. And I know that's going to be a recurring theme as we come back to it, because I know the next question that's coming up is also going to really come back to this idea of it's really important that districts have a strong vision and that they put their efforts into working that plan. And one of the things that we talked about in that last question, and I won't go too much into it right now, is professional learning. And professional learning isn't just for teachers. I think that's something that we want to think about as we go forward. But are there any other specific opportunities that we can think about? We've talked a lot about family engagement, and we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. But any other opportunities that this grant opportunity might supply districts?
Roland, for our part, at the Pritchard Committee, we have 20 school districts across the state and 40 schools working to implement a full service community school approach. And that full service community school approach consists of ensuring that young people have the health, mental health, vision, dental supports that they need. So wraparound supports in that way, extended and out of time learning. So out of school in the summertime, family and community engagement. So if you think about those three all being in support of removal of non-academic barriers to success. So fourth, teachers can do what we expect them to do, which is to support high quality learning environments. The work that those districts are doing, particularly the elementary schools that are looking at the pipeline, as Felicia mentioned, of early learning to get students started off on a strong foot as they enter kindergarten, and then supporting removal of non-academic barriers and high quality instruction in elementary school. So our students reach those proficiency benchmarks before they move on to middle school. I think there's real opportunity there with the Read to Succeed Act, the community schools work happening, and this subgrant from KDE to really deepen, again, a climate and culture around excellence in literacy.
I think the only thing I would add to that, and I think, Bridget, your illustration of how other major grant opportunities can be aligned to provide support in this way through the full service community schools. I would also add preschool development grants are available in many of our districts, and there is an emphasis on improving education and academic outcomes for even our earliest learners here in the Commonwealth. And so that preschool development grant actually could support and seed some of this work to extend for this grant opportunity, the learning that needs to occur related to that. So the preschool development grant is one other approach. And I know pretty soon, later this month, our Friskies are coming together. And we know that in the work that they do related to 21st century learning grants, there's emphasis on family literacy and improving academic outcomes for young people and families. And so if you begin to think about this comprehensive approach, I know we've mentioned it earlier, but if you begin to think about this comprehensive approach of all of these opportunities coming to the district, if we could really begin to think about the alignment related to that, you could see how each of these opportunities builds upon one another and sets a strong foundation where there is a vision for literacy as a lever for change, as you mentioned, Roland. So I appreciate both of you thinking about and calling out these specific opportunities. And there are others that we can continue to consider as a system of alignment for a district and school. I know that alignment is not easy, having worked in the largest school district here in the Commonwealth. But when you can get all the players working toward this one goal, this shared goal, and how each of those components can contribute to one another, I believe there's a great opportunity for success for young people in the district. And I would call out Washington County, who had an early one of these comprehensive school literacy grants, which really began their process of full turnaround and support that even sustained them through COVID. And we saw a lot of that really keep their academic scores in literacy at a high level without seeing the decrease that many districts saw. And it was because of this grant. It was a heartbeat of what happened in that district. So, you know, I really applaud Washington County in the efforts that they made when there's a school-wide, district-wide effort. And there are many other districts out there that are doing this work, and we need to invest in that way toward that alignment. And I know we'll see outcomes improved over time.
Yeah. Felicia, I so appreciate you just doubling down on other grants, other opportunities that can be woven in, and you're underscoring ensuring alignment. I would just add to that, encouraging folks to not think of this as a grant and as grant deliverables and as a kind of finite project. Think of it as a funding stream to support the transformation you want to see in your district. And it's one funding stream alongside many others that make up a whole. So I would really encourage trying to break the mentality of a grant being a project and think of it more as a funding stream that's an opportunity to do what you already want to do in your district.
And Felicia, that's such an important, I'm sorry, Bridget, that's such an important point. And that really brings us to this next question. And that is, what have we learned about supporting middle and high school student literacy needs as we move forward? And this question was echoed also by Dr. Joe Ellison from JCPS, as he asked this idea of how do we use this grant to really push opportunity for middle and high school students. It's great that we think about early learners, but we have a significant population of adolescent learners who are still struggling to read. And I think, again, this is where we're going to double down and triple down on that vision, and that is create a vision for what you want instruction to look like, and then develop the team that's going to implement that vision. If you look at this as a grant, it's a project that's going to have an end, as opposed to an opportunity to really hone your message and get all the stakeholders in place. The literacy leadership team is a central component of this grant. Districts have to put together a literacy leadership team. And from our perspective, the districts that have a strong literacy leadership team find success with this grant. They find a vision, they get all of their people, not just teachers understanding their role, but administrators and district leaders saying, well, my task here then is this. I've got to stay with this message. And a lot of times district leaders have to respond to lots of different challenges, and they take their eye off a certain goal. Really making sure that that literacy leadership team is made up of key stakeholders who can make the work happen and stay with it. And really, to your point earlier, Bridget, Felicia, making sure that they use the funding appropriately, but also use it to make sure that their leaders are well informed about how they impact change. We know still to this day, the number one impact on student learning is the teacher. But a close second in there is the impact that leaders have on teachers being able to do their jobs. So we don't want to put all the focus just on teachers and how they need to change, we want to think about also about how leaders can support that work effectively. There are evidence-based practices. If you look at McCrell's Tier 1 instruction that works or classroom instruction that works, that's a great place to get started about key factors that really go to making change for student learning. Those are common practices inside of these HQIRs. So instead of looking at the HQIRs as, oh, this is just an ELA component, think about what are the practices inside of those HQIRs that we can generalize to other classrooms as well. What we know about reading comprehension instruction is not hard. And there are components that we need to include in it. And it doesn't mean that we have to stop and now I'm teaching reading. I'm teaching my content, but I'm setting my students up to be successful with the reading they need to do in my content area. So there are a lot of things that we can do that are not no lift, low lift, but start with this idea of a strong vision and leaders making sure that they're doing what they need to do to help teachers implement effectively. Sorry, that's a passion one of mine, so I've been looking for that question for a while, but I'll cede the table to you.
I don't think there's any more to add, Roland. You did a fabulous job on responding to that. And clearly, I mean, we're all really passionate about this. And there's no secret to how to improve literacy for middle school and high school students. I mean, the research is very clear. It's widely available. You've identified a couple of places where individuals can go and look for that. I think the only thing I would add is just remembering that the transferable skills that you mentioned earlier, Roland, is so important when you're thinking about middle school and high school literacy, and how those skills and strategies then transfer to different types of text, and how then middle school and high school young people can improve their literacy through comprehension and be able to grapple with difficult text. Just recently this summer, I was a part of a event where legislators, some of our own legislators, were involved in encountering a text that was very difficult to them, and they had to draw upon, you know, what information could I take from this text? What background knowledge did I know and need to enter into this text? And what did I need to know about the vocabulary that was so important to aiding to my comprehension of text? And all of those are practices that we know are extremely evident and critical for readers to get better, to read well. And I think these are the kinds of approaches that are in the science of reading that can transfer to what's happening at middle school and high school. But again, I think the research is clear. I think the Pritchard Committee will be pulling together where we see promising practices, particularly for middle school and high school literacy improvement, and that will be available to the state to learn from. And so I think that is really important, and I think the pieces that you've added, Roland, are right on point.
The only thing I'll throw into the conversation, just another Kentucky-based example. We've talked about Washington County this morning, and I want to throw Fleming County into the conversation. So recently, I've heard Superintendent Brian Kreisman talk about puzzling over this issue of middle and high school literacy, and sharing the approach that they took, which was to support struggling readers in high school around an area that was of interest to them. And these were young people who were on a career trajectory, and they brought the English language arts teacher brought the OSHA manual into the classroom as the reading document for these students. It requires a high level of proficiency in reading, and yet these students, to Felicia's point, because it was relevant to them, they grasped the text, they grasped the understanding, they had reference points to connect to, and they excelled. And so thinking maybe a little bit out of the box, like Fleming County has with that example, may help us support our middle and high school students in a way that universally we haven't to date.
Okay, so we are running out of time, but we've touched a little bit on this family engagement. I'm going to give the two of you the last words on family engagement. And whether we stay directly with this, but what are the efforts around the state what have efforts around the state looked like, both in areas of success and areas of continued need for family engagement? And Bridget, we'll let you get started, and then Felicia respond to that afterwards.
Okay, terrific. So when it comes to family engagement, a couple things that are kind of at the fore for Kentucky. As part of Kentucky's receipt of a statewide Family Engagement Center grant a few years ago, here in the state with partners on the ground, we developed something called Family Friendly Schools certification. And there are a number of now, I think 70 schools across the state who have been certified as family friendly. It requires going through a process of understanding the research in family engagement and looking at school-based practices that help ensure families are connected in an effective and efficient way, and that the school is approaching families in a way that support that deepened engagement. So while it is separate from the literacy piece, from a distinct standpoint, it's foundational, I think, to what we're talking about. From a wraparound comprehensive standpoint in improving literacy in a sustainable way. So knowing the research around family engagement, opening yourselves up to it, knowing how to do it effectively is important for this effort. We at the Pritchard Committee would love to support you in that from the certification standpoint, if you're not already aware of it. Many of the things that came out of our study through the process of the statewide Family Engagement Center grant really pointed to increased communication to families in a way that resources them, that respects them as a full partner in the learning of the community. Yes, of their young person, but not just their young person, of all young people that we as an adults in a community find ourselves supporting. So increase communication to families in a way that is two-way and is rich in resources so that we're equipping one another to be the best that we can. Families found themselves feeling more like they were partners when that happened, and feeling more likely to engage with the school. So the communication would be the first thing, and then you start to pay attention to whether or not that communication is helping increase engagement. From there, you're off to the races.
Thank you. Felicia.
And the only thing I'll add, for sake of time, Bridget mentioned the research, and I just want to bring this forward. The book, Everyone Wins, The Evidence for Family School Partnerships and Implications for Practice. And, the things that the research that Bridget mentioned is highlighted in this text by Dr. Karen Mapp, Ann Henderson, and others. And the research is actually outlined in this text also for middle and high school. I know that was a previous question that we had, but no matter the academic area, today we're talking about literacy. What we know is that when parents and caregivers are involved in the learning, they also enhance their own skills to be able to help their children at home. And that is really the genesis of the National Center for Families Learning. We also believe that family literacy is essential for schools to really begin to think about how are we deeply engaging parenting adults, caregivers, and early learners in the process. And then I'd also say at the early learning phase, we're seeing some growing evidence around play groups that happen in the community where effective practices are beginning to introduce our youngest learners to those early literacy skills and get them off on the right start. So all of that together, I think, makes for where we're seeing pockets of evidence of successful strategies and practices that are being implemented across the state. And we need to continue, and we need to double down on those efforts.
I do want to say I also saw the comprehensive early learning centers highlighted in IES study that just came out last week. So I appreciate you bringing that up. And again, as we go back to and think about research-based practices, there are a lot of things that are out there that are relatively new, and that IES study highlighted some things since 2017 that we've seen put in place. And while that does seem a long time ago, now that it's 2024, from a research perspective, that's not very long ago. And so we want to think about how we build off of what we have just learned recently to continue the momentum as we move forward.
Roland, would you also mention the adolescent literacy model here? Because I think this is also really important for others across the state to know the spread of that approach and how it is impacting middle and high school, where many districts may not know what to implement.
Yeah, so thank you, Felicia. So our work in the original Striving Readers grant funded in Kentucky in 2006 was developing and piloting our adolescent literacy model, and that was now 20 or 18 years ago. And the adolescent literacy model looks at those comprehensive literacy components, and how do you engage students in reading effectively, engaging with content effectively, so that as they are working through any content area, they're looking at general practices that they can generalize across multiple classrooms. This also goes back to that McCrell work that I mentioned earlier, and those 14 factors of Tier 1 and of effective Tier 1 instruction. Strategy-based focuses allow students to understand what's going on in a classroom so that they don't have to learn something in Dr. Smith's classroom and Ms. Bloom's classroom and Mr. O'Daniel's classroom. They can generalize those practices across classrooms that free up cognitive demand. Now, that is part of comprehensive literacy, but KDE, and again, I appreciate that KDE has taken a focus on HQIR and the high quality professional learning in this grant to support that around foundational literacy, because that's a pressing need. But as students think about working, or as administrators think about working with students in other classrooms, don't look at those practices inside of that foundational literacy and say, oh, they're only for English students. When you have students that are trying to grapple with hard content, with really rigorous content, the same components, a before reading, a active during reading, and an active after reading strategy are important in all content areas. So we want to think about how we support students in engaging with content, no matter where the area is. But again, the design of the high quality professional learning is going to do that. It's the task of the administrators and districts to think about how they help other content areas engage with content. Okay. We don't have any other questions that have popped up. And by the way, we're 1 minute over. So I'm going to give the two of you closing remarks. And so Felicia, I'll let you get started, and then Bridget, I'll let you follow up after her. So is there anything that you would like to take away, ensure that people take away from our time together today?
Yeah, just briefly, I'll just reiterate the importance of creating coherence across the system, P12, and in the areas of early learning, really focusing in on what's happening in your community that you can build upon so that those youngest learners in your community and that will be coming into your district are ready and prepared. So alignment, and emphasis on using the high quality instructional resources and professional learning to reach your goals.
And ditto to everything Felicia just said. And I'll just add, don't try to do it all on your own. Make sure you're bringing family and community into the conversation as real support for our learners, removal of non-academic barriers so that educators can do what they've been trained to do, which is to bring all the professional expertise to the highest quality teaching and learning environments that our youngsters are ready for.
Thank you all. Thank you for your time today. I greatly appreciate your input. As a result of this conversation, we will be sending out our KYCL planning guide, and we encourage you to do exactly what Bridget said. Don't do this alone. Reach out, get some input from other people. We're happy to be a resource. We're working with several districts right now to think about what their plans can look like. And really want to make sure that as many districts are successful with this work as possible. I know that this is, again, going back to the vision that KDE has created, another step in pushing a really strong vision for reading in Kentucky. And as Bridget pointed out when we first got started, when Kentucky puts its mind to it, we can make great things happen. So I appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a great week.
Thank you. So do want to leave you with this. Our next webinar in this series will be November 21st. It will include Eric Hirsch, the founding executive director of Ed Reports, and Dr. Tom Guskey, a professor emeritus of the University of Kentucky. Both of these gentlemen have done a lot of work in high quality